After the Detroit Lions' disheartening loss yesterday against the Baltimore Ravens, some Lions fans have continued to wonder very loudly if the Lions should make a move and shake up on the roster as we get set for the second half of the season. We're going to talk about it in today's episode, folks, so stay tuned. It started with an owner who had a last name fans despised, hiring a coach that the experts thought was crazy.
But I got a plan, I swear to you.
Who traded for a QB that was said to be washed up. They said the Detroit Lions would never amount to anything, that it would always be the same old Lions. But this team, our team, has a new identity, defined and expressed by the crazy head coach.
Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes, I will beat your ass.
Led by the QB that nobody thought was good. Motor City Mania is in full swing and ready to start. So join the show and be prepared for kneecap biting, because Motor City Mania starts right now. Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host David T. Pike, and we're diving in right now. As always, I just want to welcome back everybody that's been to the channel before. Hopefully you guys enjoy the content. Thank you all for your view, your support, your patronage, and to the newcomers to the show. Again, I also hope you enjoy the show, and I also hope that you guys will give me your subscription, and you guys will keep coming back, and we can keep enjoying content with each other. So, as always, I just want to say God bless, and let's dive into the content. Here's the thing, folks. When we take a look at what happened yesterday with the loss against the Baltimore Ravens, again, like I said, that was an embarrassing loss. It was a painful loss, a stinging loss, whatever term you'd like to use. That was how you could describe that loss against the Ravens, because that was a game that a lot of us thought we were going to have a much better shot of winning. It felt like, hey, you know what? We should be able to put up some sort of a fight. Even if we lose, it should be close. And none of those things at all were even remotely close to accurate or reality. It was just an embarrassing loss, and there's no other way around it. But, as the saying goes, there's no sense crying over spilled milk. It's happened, it's over with, it's done. We got to move forward. We got to start getting ready for the freaking Raiders that are coming to town on Monday Night Football. But, I do know this for a fact. There are a lot of Lions fans that have continued to voice very strongly, voice very loudly, that they would like to see Brad Holmes do something before the NFL trade line, which is actually on Halloween this year. Well, here's the thing. I have continued to push back against the idea of potential trade options. But, again, as a podcaster, you have to take a look at all potential avenues. You have to take a look at all potential scenarios. So, what we're going to do in today's episode is we're not just only going to look at trade scenarios, which that's going to be part of today's episode, but we're also going to take a look at potential free agent targets that Brad Holmes could decide to bring in and decide to give a little bit of a mid-season jolt to this roster. So, that's what we're going to talk about today. So, without further ado, we're going to dive in, and we're going to start with the free agent targets. Because here's the likelihood, I think, in my mind. I don't think a trade is as likely as a free agent acquisition. So I want to start with the free agent acquisitions and then get to the trades a little bit later, because the trades are a little bit more intricate. So let's take a look at the free agent targets. I know for a fact that when it comes to free agent targets, virtually anything that anybody's going to want to talk about, and again, not just free agent targets, I was a little misspoken in that. Free agent targets, trade targets, all anybody's really going to want to talk about potentially is freaking defensive players. Somebody might want to talk about potentially a running back or a wide receiver. I don't think that's going to happen. I think realistically, both Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, Ben Johnson, they're all fine with what they have offensively. They're not really going to try and go and get anybody else. They feel good with what they have, regardless of the injury situation or regardless of whatever else is going on. So, we're going to focus mainly on defensive players in this. Here's what I'm going to say as far as the free agent acquisitions. If we take a look at free agents, there are a couple of positions that I know a lot of Lions fans are particularly talking about right now. That's defensive end or edge rusher, defensive tackle, and I know a lot of people are talking about cornerbacks. So that's what we're going to talk about here really quickly. So let's take a look at the edge rushers really quick. The first edge rusher that I think that the Lions could potentially go out and get that actually could be a really, really good shot of like energy in the arm would be the recently released edge rusher from the Broncos, Frank Clark. Now, here's the reason why I think Frank Clark would be a really good acquisition. Number one, he's got a lot of experience. He's still got plenty of tread left on his tires. He's only 30 years old. Like, he just recently turned 30 years old. Edge rushers have a lot longer of a shelf life after 30 years old than a lot of other positions. So for me, that's one reason. I like the fact that he's still reasonably young. He's still got a lot of tread on his tires. He's got plenty of experience. Then, let's take a look at this. To back up that experience, there's plenty of production. Ever since Frank Clark came into the league in 2015, he has 60 sacks. That means right there, this guy is a sack master. This guy can get a lot of pressure. He can get a lot of sacks opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. You would now have a viable threat on the opposite end of an edge rusher in terms of Frank Clark. The other reason I really like this idea is because, well, there's always that Michigan connection that I like, even though that's not something that really should be factored into this, but I like to bring it up. Frank Clark went to U of M for college, so again, he's used to playing in Michigan, he's used to playing in our weather, he's used to being around the Michigan natives and being around Detroit and all that nonsense. So for me, that's something else that I like to throw in here as well. And then the final thing is this, going back to the whole production, again, 60 sacks since 2015. But at the same time, he's had 2 seasons since being in the NFL where he had double-digit sacks. So again, not only does he have consistent production overall, but again, he usually gets pretty good high production as well. So again, for me, it's like, listen, hey, if you want to throw a flyer out to this guy, see if he's willing to come in, attach himself to a team that's considered an up-and-coming team, a potential contending team, throw him out a contract, see what he wants to do. That's one guy I can think of. The other guy that I can think of, again, is a guy with a lot of experience. Not necessarily as much production as Clark, but again, a lot of experience. And that would be the former Washington Commanders, Washington Redskins edge rusher. Hopefully I pronounced his name right. Matthew Ioannidis. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm pretty confident I didn't, so I apologize. But again, when you take a look at Matthew, he's 29 years old, so again, plenty of tread still left on the tire, still pretty young, but again, he's also had fairly consistent production since joining the league, but again, his production pales in comparison to Frank Clark. Matthew only has 26 sacks since joining the league in 2016, so he has one less year of experience than Clark, but he has less than half of the sack production that Clark has. But again, if you're looking for somebody who's going to be able to come in, is a hard worker, has done a really good job being in the NFL as a consistent player, which is right up Dan Campbell's alley, this would be another guy that really, in my opinion, would fit the bill. And again, probably wouldn't cost nearly as much. Frank Clark might be a little bit more expensive, but again, if you're wanting to go out there and you want to get an edge rusher that can really help out Aiden Hutchinson, these are the 2 guys that, in my opinion, that would really, really help out the most, in my opinion. So, those are the edge rushers. Now, when we take a look at the next group in this, it would be the defensive tackle position. Because here's the thing, and I'm going to say this also about the edge rusher before we go to the defensive tackle. The only reason why I'm not very high on potentially going out and getting someone on these defensive positions is because of the fact we still have guys on this roster that were either 1, waiting for them to come back from injury, or 2, we still don't know really a whole lot about them. Case in point, go back to the edge rusher really quickly. I'm just going to say this right now. We still have James Houston on this roster. He should be coming back from injury relatively shortly. So it's like, do you really want to spend some money when you still got James the Problem Houston that's on this roster? Would it just be a little bit more prudent to wait for him potentially? That's actually a sincere question. I'm not saying that like in a certain kind of way. That's actually a sincere question. But then, when you take a look at defensive tackle, the Lions have plenty of defensive tackle pieces that we still don't really know anything about. Broderick Martin is one of them. We're still kind of figuring out what Levi can do for us. Levi Onwuzurike. And we just got Josh Pascal back off of the injury, off of being injured. So it's like, there's a lot of guys that we still don't know what we have in terms of defensive tackle. But again, I'm kind of doing this for the fans. I'm talking about it because I know there are a lot of Lions fans that want Brad Holmes to do something. And it's like, listen, when you take a look at the defensive tackle market is a little bit sparse. It's a little bit bare in terms of what there is to potentially offer. But there's one name that I know a lot of Lions fans, well, some Lions fans, I can't say a lot, some Lions fans would really, really love to see don the Honolulu Blue again. And you all know exactly where I'm going with this because I said again, it'd be Ndamukong Suh. Ndamukong Suh has been that kind of player. Is like, listen, he's vying for championships. He wants to win rings. The Lions are right now in a position where they could say, listen, we have a roster. We have a team that could really, really get us into that part if you were to join the roster and help out our defense. Now, let's consider the pros and cons of this. One, Ndamukong Suh has played for the Lions. He knows exactly what it's like playing for them. He knows the kind of style they like to play. Again, that was a couple of years ago, but he would fit right in like a glove with the Detroit Lions because it's the exact same kind of vibe there. Because, again, this is the kind of team that pretty much has been built up by Dan Campbell, which resonates to all the hard times back in those days. So, for me, it's like I think Ndamukong Suh would fit pretty well with Dan Campbell. It might be a little bit of a growing pain situation, but I think it would work. Now, here's the one thing I know a lot of Lions fans are not going to like. The fact that, one, Ndamukong Suh was known as a dirty player when he was with the Lions. And that's not really going to vibe with Dan Campbell. It's like, listen, being dirty, being mean, being nasty about it, that's not something the Lions want to be known for. They want to be known as gritty but fair players. So that might be a problem. The other problem for me is the fact that Ndamukong Suh is 36 years old, folks. I mean, if we sign him, it would be nice to have him back in a Lions uniform, yeah. But realistically, what production is he going to really bring to a team like ours at 36 years old? Again, when you've got guys like Broderick Martin, Levi, and Pascal that are on the roster, for me it's just like, if you bring in Ndamukong Suh, at most he's probably going to be a mentor role who could really do something here or there. But for me, it's kind of like, I just don't really know if it's worth it. But again, out of all the defensive tackles that are currently free agents right now, he's the best name out there. So I just like, okay, let's put that in there just for the sake of conversation. But honestly, I'm not really in love with it. Now, after defensive tackle, then there's the cornerback idea. There is one cornerback out there on the free agent market that I really, really, really am interested in. Actually, a guy that I have on my live stream actually brought it up, and after looking at it, I actually really am into this idea. It's cornerback Desmond King. This is a guy that used to be a former All-Pro. He was a former first-team All-Pro and second-team All-Pro in 2018. He's 28 years old. He's the same age, if I recall correctly, as freaking Cameron Sutton. If you take a look at his PFF record and you take a look at how he's done in the NFL overall, he's been consistently a good cover corner and a good tackling corner. So again, would be a very nice fit with this Lions defense because they want cornerbacks that can cover well as tackle well. And then, you have to think about this. Talking about Cameron Sutton, he would be a nice addition opposite of Cameron Sutton because it's like, listen, I like Jerry Jacobs, but it's like it would be wise to get somebody else outside of Jerry Jacobs that can really cover. And I think Desmond King would be a really, really good addition. And then on top of that, much like how I talked with Frank Clark having gone to U of M for college, Desmond King was born and raised in Detroit. So it's like, again, he knows what it's like being in that city. He knows what it's like with the Lions. I think it would be a really, really good fit. So for me, if there was one cornerback free agent that I would really be interested in, it would be Desmond King. Now, let's talk about the trades here really quickly because I know that's what everybody's interested in because trade rumors are juicy. They're something that people like to talk about. In my honest opinion, there are 3 trades that would realistically make a lot of sense, but let's be fair and honest here. 2 of them are not likely to happen due to the price tag. But again, we'll talk about them anyway. The first trade up that I know a lot of Lions fans would potentially like to have is Max Crosby, the defensive end edge rusher from the Raiders. The Raiders are 3-4 right now. They're kind of a middling team. Maybe the Raiders might decide to sell so that way they can restart their entire roster because again, there's also rumblings with Davante Adams, but the Raiders have already said they're not trading Adams. Nothing has been said about Max Crosby. But I'm telling you this right now, from a production perspective, if you were to put Max Crosby opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, quarterbacks beware because it would just be an absolute nightmarish hell for said quarterbacks. But again, I talked about Max Crosby in a previous episode. I'll put that episode back at the top. The reason why I don't think the Raiders are going to trade away Max Crosby and why I don't think the Lions are going to trade for him is a twofold reason. One, the Raiders and Max Crosby just signed an extension back in 2022, a 4-year, almost $100 million contract. That would be a huge dead cap hit for the Raiders. But then on top of that, for the Lions to trade for Crosby, you're talking about a first-round draft pick and a couple of middle-round draft picks. That's just not something that Brad Holmes does. Brad Holmes has never traded high draft capital like that before. He usually tries to find guys on the cheap. And I know I know for a fact that there are a lot of Lions fans that are saying that if Brad Holmes wants to take this roster to the contention level, he's got to open up the purse strings and he's got to stop buying players on the cheap. But it's like, listen, everything that Brad Holmes has done up until this point has worked. I feel a little bit hesitant to pretty much say, yeah, what you've done doesn't work anymore. We want you now to start completely redoing everything that you've done to get us to this point, because it's like, listen, you could go that route, but I don't really want to turn out to be like the Los Angeles Rams. I would much rather prefer to continue on the path we've been going right now and slowly build our way up. But again, I'm doing this because I know there are fans out there that are very, very vocal about getting in a big-time player. Max Crosby would definitely fit that. But the question is, do you really want to try and foot that bill? Because on top of that, the Lions only have like $7 million in cap space left. There ain't no way we're going to be able to fit freaking Max Crosby on this roster unless we restructure or let go of some guys. So there's that. Now, the next guy that would be a big-time name for the Lions would be edge rusher Brian Burns from the Carolina Panthers. Let's be honest here. The Carolina Panthers, they are sinking, and they are sinking faster than a freaking lead ball in water because they cannot seem to win games. I think they haven't even won a game yet. And at this point, it would look like that, hey, you know what? Maybe the Panthers want to sell. They want to get more draft capital so they can rebuild. They can restart what they were trying to do this year, next year. Brian Burns would definitely get a lot of draft capital for them because he's a really young player. He's 25 years old. You could get a first or a second round draft pick for him, and it would definitely help you in your draft process. However, though, the problem with the Lions is, again, I don't think that Brad Holmes is going to trade that high of draft capital, but then there's the secondary problem. This is a contract year for Brian Burns. If you trade for Brian Burns, you would have to immediately negotiate a new deal for him. And the Lions already have a lot of mouths they have to potentially feed. There's freaking Jonah Jackson. There's Jared Goff. Amon-Ra St. Brown is coming up very, very quickly. These are all guys that the Lions have to potentially re-sign to new deals. And at the same time, they're definitely going to want to get out some other guys that they bring in through via free agency. So it's like there's a potential that Brian Burns doesn't even re-sign with the freaking, Panthers, and the Lions could pick him up in free agency in the offseason. Granted, that wouldn't help us out right now, but the whole point of the matter is, again, I don't see the Lions making a trade for Brian Burns because they're not likely to trade the high draft capital, and I don't think they're going to try and re-sign him as soon as we get him. I just don't see that happening. Now, there is one guy from the Panthers that I do think the Lions could go after, and that's cornerback Dante Jackson. Again, according to PFF, they think that you could get Dante Jackson for a 4th and a 6th round pick. That's definitely in Brad Holmes' wheelhouse as far as a guy that you could potentially go out and get for the cheap. He's 27 years old. Plenty of tread still left on the tires for Dante Jackson. He hasn't played particularly well this year, but in years past he has. So again, if you're looking for a guy that would fit right in Brad Holmes' wheelhouse as far as cost, first and foremost, this would be the guy, number one. But also number two, he's young. He fits a position of need in cornerback. This would be a trade that I really think the Lions could actually pull off for Dante Jackson if they were to go with a trade. Now, I know, again, if you talk to some Lions fans, they're like, David, why not go after Patrick Surtain? Why not go after him? I'll tell you why. Because there's no chance it's going to happen. First and foremost, the Broncos are not going to trade him away. He's 23 years old. He's one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, number one. Number two, the dead cap that the Broncos would have to eat would absolutely destroy their roster because chances are they're not keeping Russell Wilson after this year either, which is another dead cap hit they're going to have to endure. And then on top of that, you have to consider this as well. The amount of draft capital that freaking Brad Holmes would have to give up to get Patrick Surtain would just be absolutely mind-blowing. You would have to give up at least a first or potentially 2 firsts to get him. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think, again, Brad Holmes is in the business of making big-time trades like that. He could prove me wrong, but again, given his track record, I just don't see it happening, folks. Again, I think it's more likely that Brad Holmes goes to the free agent market, maybe picks up a guy like Frank Clark, maybe picks up a guy like Desmond King, brings them in to give a kind of, reinforcement, kind of shake up to the roster, give some rejuvenation to this roster as we start to get ready for the second half of the year. But again, as far as I'm concerned, the way that Brad Holmes, the way Dan Campbell have built this roster, they also are kind of like this. Listen, we like the guys that we have. We like the guys that we brought to the dance. We're going to stick with the guys that we brought to the dance. So this all could be for naught, and I could just be blowing a whole bunch of wind out, and ain't nobody going to be listening anyway. But We'll see what you guys, the fans, think. So without further ado, I'm just going to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM, Motor City Mania. If you enjoyed what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to do one of these three things or all three of them. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not yet had a chance to do so, first and foremost, I again highly encourage you all, please subscribe to the channel. But also, once you subscribe, make sure you turn on that bell notification icon that's at the bottom of the page along with it, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, subscription numbers are always going up, but I want y'all to turn on that bell notification icon so as soon as I have something new, you guys can come right on in, you guys can watch it. I also encourage y'all, please, share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook. Share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. And with that, folks, I just want to say thank you all for your time. Thank you all for your view, your support, your patronage. Hopefully I gained your subscription. And with that, I just want to say God bless. And until the next time we meet, I'll see y'all in the next episode.